this?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Afternoon FM. Today, I'm joined by Paul from Union City Heroes and Los Lost from Selfar. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
Too bad, rocking some D-Light, drinking some Brooklyn Lager. We're not sponsored by them, but hopefully ours is pretty goddamn good. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about this man's life, his heroes, Dungeons and Dragons, his events coming up, and yeah, thank you for joining me, bro.
Absolutely, yeah, we're gonna get into a lot of fun, geeky, nerdy stuff, some of which is happening right here in Patterson, but this has been a long journey that got us here. It's a fun story for about how all this came up, and I'm really excited to be here and talking to you.
Word, I am as well, bro. So let's get behind the man behind the heroes. So, Mr. Paul, tell me a little bit about your life. What is
Sure. So I'm the oldest of 5 brothers.
Oh, Jesus.
We're a literal fraternity.
Wow.
Yeah.
What is that like?
It's kind of crazy. We lost our mom when we were real little, and our dad was working to like support us in a big way. So we were kind of on our own in a Lost Boys situation for a while, and it was a kind of really fun, interesting way to grow up, kind of looking out for each other. But we had this like big backyard that backed up to a bird sanctuary, so we had all these woods we'd go out and play in, and like we're kind of living the Lost Boys lifestyle for a while there, and it made us all really close.
Where's this at?
So we lived in Watchung, New Jersey.
Oh, where?
Right up by the Watchung Reservation. So there's a lot of open space there, a lot of reserved land, and our house happened to have this huge amount of woods behind it with a brook running through it, where we'd build like forts and play like Lord of the Rings and made up our own characters, and that's really like kind of where this all started. It was us running around the woods together with our own like wooden swords and this cool stick I found.
Yeah. I do the same when I was like a little kid, man.
Of course.
My grandmother has a spot up in Sussex County.
Awesome.
And just growing up, man, it was like there was nothing there. I remember just playing like Knights of the Old Republic a lot.
Oh, that was a great game.
Amazing.
Great game.
Fucking amazing.
One of the best stories in RPGs, you know?
Yeah, bro. And I just remember playing Knights of the Old Republic and then like just fucking picking up same shit, man. Picking up sticks and just pretending they're swords.
Or lightsabers, as the case may be. Or bows, or wizard staffs,
That and Dynasty Warriors, bro. Dynasty Warriors was the shit.
Yep, and so, like, it was kind of, thinking back on it, I realized we were really developing this kind of group storytelling, this imagination-based storytelling that we still do together because a bunch of the people I still play with are my brothers. You know, we've got like a little less than half the group is made up of my blood relations.
No way, that's awesome.
Yeah, and we're still a really tight fraternity.
You're still the big brother of it all. You're like,
to a degree. I think they think I'm up in their business too much sometimes, but I'm kind of like, nah, I gotta.
Dude, you're never gonna be dungeon master if you keep up this shit.
Yeah, well, I'm about to have a kid, so they're gonna need to step up to do some dungeon mastering soon.
All right, we're gonna get into that a little bit later. Man.
Yeah.
Wow. How far along?
We're due November 13th.
Damn,
so,
bro, congratulations.
Apropos of which, the conclusion of the Worlds Collide game here, Prototype 237, is like the 14th of November.
Oh,
so we have built in a baby date. Like, if we're going into labor the day that this game has its conclusion, we have a backup date just in case.
I say you deliver it here.
I know, right?
During the match.
Well, I'll talk to the
And you
doula
will
about
throw
that.
off fucking anybody who dares oppose you.
Yeah. Amanda would really love that. That sounds like her dream.
Well, having a baby in the middle of
Yes.
Dragons
In a live performance while I'm busy rolling dice. Yeah.
There's a dude in a wizard hat playing the That's a fucking what's the midwife?
Yeah. Or the doula performing birth magic.
That sounds like a David Baldacci fucking like novels like name. It's like the paladin who was also a midwife.
That's a great story. I mean, that sounds like a real humanist take on it.
Yes. We could only be so lucky.
I know. Well, it's this kind of like postmodern ideas, or the rehashing of those stereotypes, those tropes that I think for a long time our Dungeons and Dragons group has been doing, because we've been doing this for so long, and we're cognizant of story types and character types, and we want to really play with those and really tell like kind of a unique story, but also fit it into a familiar form, something that's recognizable. It's like this kind of fantasy adventure, and it feels like Worlds Collide is really going to be part of the culmination of that. Like, we've really been kind of working on these ideas, these kind of postmodern takes on like a classic Dungeons and Dragons, and it's like an evolution from where Tolkien was, right?
Yeah.
With his, we all kind of have that as a baseline, but like having the paladin be a midwife is a way of taking that and being like, hold on, like, it's the 21st century now, we're 100 years past Tolkien. We can recognize this as classic and do something with it that's much more relevant or much more new to our day.
The way you're describing it, and to the viewers and everybody, I'm like kind of a noob. I know a little bit about it. I know Hero Quest because my older brother is very big into board games, but he was never a Dungeons and Dragons guy. Right. It was mostly like Shogun.
Yep. Okay.
That was a weird game.
Great book.
Great game, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I thought you meant the book. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. Los Los.
Yes.
Chime it in. Fucking the way you're describing it makes it like kind of sound like a theater piece.
Well, Worlds Collide certainly is going to be that, because we're performing it on stage. We're going to have lights and sound. We're going to have a soundtrack written by Solfar.
Whoa.
Which is why,
Yep.
Which is why Solfar is here today.
Yeah.
So this is really Dungeons & Dragons, when it's done well, is very theatrical, and it plays that way. The only thing is the audience, generally speaking, is entirely made up of the players, the contributors, right? It's like a bunch of actors getting together and doing a play for just themselves, but one they're making up on the spot.
So it's kind of like an improv.
Yeah, very much so, absolutely.
Oh, that's great.
Even at its base, a lot of people, they get the adventure module when they start out playing Dungeons and Dragons, right? And it's like the Curse of the Troll's Bridge, and you go like, oh, awesome, I can be a dwarf like Gimli, right? Like, I've got an axe, and like, you're like, cool, like, I've got this character sheet, and I got a +3 with my axe. Like, that sounds awesome. And I've got a 17 armor class. Like, that makes me really tough to hit compared to my friends. So you kind of go, and it's this story of like, you go and you fight the troll and you save the bridge, right? And you get gold and you level up. All of these are things that a lot of us were familiar with from like computer or from video games, right?
I'm a big Morrowind guy. This is a
totally. So you know exactly about.
Yeah.
So far as is agreeable.
Yeah. No, I'm a big Morrowind fan too. And I played all that kind of stuff before I played tabletop RPGs, but it's basically the same thing.
Are you in the subsect that Morrowind is its own like elite platform above Oblivion and Skyrim?
I would honestly say Morrowind is probably the best, and then Oblivion.
It's weird,
and then
right?
Skyrim, but they're also good. They're
great. They're wonderful games. The thing about Morrowind, and I think it's a little bit alluding to what Dungeons and Dragons is that Morrowind doesn't even have like a fucking like map. I mean, it has a map, but it has like there's no there's no like, here's your fucking breadcrumbs to where it is.
Yep.
It's just like a vague journal entry.
Yeah.
And then after you're off that fucking ship,
you could go
it's
anywhere.
just your world.
Yeah.
There's no thing. Like, you know what I mean? It's like really.
Yeah.
It's like, and there's no chronology of what the fuck like you're supposed to be doing. There's no there's no breadcrumb. That's what I love about it. It's just your own world, really.
Yeah. Well, I would say in D&D the best dungeon masters, which Paul absolutely is, having played a whole bunch of games that he's curated, which I think is the right word. You get that same sense of it being totally open, like anything could happen, and yet behind the scenes there's plotted out a bunch of cool things to happen that make sequential sense and add up to a story. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get that sense of, as a player, wow, like I don't know what's coming next, anything could happen, but also knowing whatever it's going to be is satisfied because it was sort of planned out in this way. So that's kind of what drew me from, computer RPGs or video game RPGs into like tabletop playing.
Yeah, that's I don't know, man. That's the thing, is like you get the satisfaction of it.
Yeah.
Like a lot more, I feel, but it's like.
And we've played like he was in a series of Star Wars RPGs I did.
Those are the best.
Where, thank you, I appreciate the praise.
What was like the context of the Star Wars?
So it was kind of taking place after Return of the Jedi, kind of ignoring all the 7, 8, and 9, and it was the story of the aftermath, and everybody created their own character. All the big heroes were in the background at best. But it was this epic story where we had these moments of like he was somebody's sister who was like a rogue Jedi, and the brother was an Imperial officer, and they had this standoff on this planet, and like awesome. Nobody knew what was going to happen. Either one of them could have died, and like that would have been it, because these games were done as one day, one session affairs, where it's like, okay, beginning, middle, to end. Like we're gonna open with the opening crawl and end with the end credits here.
That's cool.
So like, whatever decisions you make, go big, leave it all on the table, and like, people did, like, characters died, like, someone got away with like the treasure, and like was like, nope, I'm out, I'm fucking sailing off into the horizon.
It's like a storytelling jam.
Yeah, in a big way.
So sick.
And that's what every Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop role-playing game is. It's just, these are skills to do this well, to tell a story that's compelling, that like your players are really going to get into, that even an audience can get into. It takes time, and it takes like really recognizing what these things are and how to implement them. And so I've seen other people's games, and I know this is going to sound super snobbish, but I'm like, okay, cool, like you got a +3 flail. That's cute. Awesome. That's great, man. Like, and it's not like I've got a character with a +10 flail. Like, no. I'm beyond caring about the flail. Yeah. Like, this is about telling a story where, like, I have sessions where, like, yes, I made people cry. Like,
that's the goal.
Wept. Yeah. I made
and
everybody gasp.
The sequel to the Paladin as a midwife.
Yeah.
And the Paladin wept.
the weeping Paladin.
The implication of the midwife Paladin weeping is pretty rough.
Oh man. All right. Oh man. All right.
But that's the other thing. Like with Dungeons and Dragons, you can get into whatever themes you want to. Yeah. You can get whatever themes you want to, or you can avoid them, right? Like, you cater to the people you're gaming with. Like, okay, this dude's really into this like thing with an elf war. Like, okay, so we'll get into that, and like this one wants to play power politics. Like, cool, so we'll have that element. And so like, not only are the characters' decisions forming the game, but with a good dungeon master, game master, author, like, all the things that they're after are going to get implemented into the story.
Word.
So yeah, and it's a really interesting dynamic between like when the person writing the adventure, when the person running the game knows the player's characters, and then goes, okay, now I can finish my story. Like, now in my head I can plot out like what's going to happen, like what the ancillary characters are and what they can do, and like the positions I can put your characters in, because now I know who you are, what you care about, where you want your story to end.
Where?
And like build a path so that you can get there, or a path that like you can fail.
So the Dungeon Master is serving as an author in this sense, like the author of the story.
Yes, to a degree. Yes.
Did you ever read Choose Your Own Adventure books when you were a kid?
Mm-hmm.
A little bit. I played a lot of Myst.
Oh, Myst is a phenomenal game.
It's close as I got.
Myst has that same like open, mysterious feel, but the Choose Your Own Adventure books, it's like you get a kind of lead for a story, and then you pick where you go, but it's all plotted out, yet it has multiple endings. You know, a tactic, again, the video games have picked up on. But that's, I think, what a good D&D game feels like.
Yes, totally. It's just, instead of the pages being prescribed, like, next chapter's pages haven't been written yet. You can change them, and you can adapt to what's happened on the pages you just chose. And there's also an infinity of options as opposed to a couple.
Yep. Exactly.
And
it's
there's
responsive.
Yes. And there's also the fun element of there are numbers, you know? You have an attack dice and hit points and all that stuff. You can get in a fight with goblins or a dragon, and it can be, like, compelling, you know, in those moments of, like, oh, man, like, I've got 7 hit points left. I need... exactly.
The pressure's on. You got, like, I gotta fucking roll, bro, or I'm gonna get my ass killed right now.
The guards are after you. You can jump across to the next roof, but, like, you need a DC 15 jump. Like, roll the dice, man. Like, you got a 25% chance. What are you doing? Like... And in those moments, like, yeah, but if I fall, I'm gonna die. Yeah.
Have any of your players become degenerate gamblers after?
So it's not like a computer RPG because, like, it's really interesting. My brother Joe was just talking about that, how one of his first characters, like, was just like, oh, I'm gonna loot the bodies while nobody's looking, and I'm gonna, like, take all this treasure, and, like, he was amassing all this wealth and, like, being scheming, and, like, he got all this cool stuff. He got all these powerful items. And when the game ended, or when that chapter ended, and we each had like an epilogue written by the Dungeon Master, he was like, and Leodon Ost, you know, when he died in the North, nobody cared or remembered. Like, his family celebrated, and Joe was like, oh, I got all that cool stuff, but it didn't matter. Because when we move on, like, that's not, like, telling a cool story or having an effect on the world. Like, that's what makes a good character good. And, like, he was just telling me about this, like, epiphany he had and, like, wanting to tell the other players about it. And I'm like, yes, I think we all go through that in certain stages of realizing what the game's about.
Yeah. Word. That's beautiful, honestly.
Right?
The person who really cared about money is they fucking... no, that's awesome.
It's not about that.
Life.
Yeah.
It's great art, bro.
Yep.
Yeah. So none of the games are the same.
No game is the same. That's one of the interesting and kind of
like how is that? I know it's Gary Gygax.
Oh, so
is it Gary Gygax?
Yes. Yep. No, you're right. It's enough in the cultural consciousness that you do know the creator. So what he did,
a lot of alliteration as well.
And yeah, something I'm guilty of. It's, he took tabletop wargaming. Like, so they had these games where you'd play as, like, Napoleonic armies or, like, medieval armies. And you'd roll dice to see, like, whose side is doing better. And you could play out famous battles and stuff. But there was no, like, role-playing to it. It was just kind of, like, it was this wargaming, this miniature wargaming. And Gary Gygax is the one who was like, what if Merlin was there? How do I write rules for, what happens when Merlin shows up in this battle? And from that, he came up with, well, we can also tell this story about why Merlin's there and what happens, when the castle falls or when we save it, right? And so he started developing these rules, and he's the first one to really come up with codifying this kind of rule and also kind of setting the precedent of it being like a very Tolkien-esque, very Lord of the Rings kind of epic fantasy. With dragons and demons, and in the early days he was using terms from Tolkien, and the estate sued him.
So that's the base.
That's the base. That's where it all came from. So he's the one who came up with that. And from there it's expanded in an infinite number of directions. There are like
There's insane amounts of expansion packs.
and of systems, right? He created Dungeons and Dragons trademark, right? But you can play like there are lots of other quests or lots of other systems that let you do role playing. You don't even need one. You can just say every time you attack, roll a d6, and if you get a 5 or 6, you hit.
Yeah.
The mechanics behind it are in an infinity of variations. Dungeons and Dragons is just one of them. Oh. But they own the terms like Dungeon Master because that's what he came up with.
Yeah.
So other games have to have a Game Master or a Narrator or an Arbiter or whatever. It's just, there's a lot of terminology that is owned by Dungeons and Dragons, trademark, the Wizards of the Coast Corporation. Same guys who own Magic the Gathering.
But now there's, like you said, you can get, like, the Marvel RPG,
Yep.
the Game
Marvel
of Thrones
RPG is still based on, like, the same kind of, like...
The same kind of rule set, but in that universe. Or, like, the Game of Thrones one, that's, like, same kind of rule set, but in that universe.
That's a good example, right?
That's
with Game of
the first one I ever
Thrones.
played was the Game of Thrones one when my brother got it.
Oh, yeah. There were actually 3 different companies that made systems for a Game of Thrones role-playing game.
Huh.
They were all pretty small. None of them were big hits. But that shows you that, like, the story is the big thing, and, like, the system is just your way of doing it. It's not even the world building. It's like, it's how you interact with the world. When you say, like, I reach up, like, I jump across this gap, right? What do you roll to do that? How can you affect those rolls? That's what the system is. It's just the numbers. It's like the physics of the world. The stories are your own thing, but even if, like, so Dungeons and Dragons and the Pathfinder role-playing game and Savage Worlds, all of them have these things called adventure modules, which is like an adventure in a book, or these days a PDF.
Yeah.
And it's the same kind of, terrible trouble at Mud Lake Swamp. And in each of them it says, like, your players start off at this bar and they hear about the terrible trouble at Mud Lake Swamp, and then they go and, like, they find these frog people, and here's the stats for the frog people, and then, it kind of guides you through this adventure. But even if, multiple people have played that same adventure, their characters were different, and what happened in it is totally different. And it's even more individualized than, like, a video game, because when you play a video game, like, you have the same NPCs you're going to run into, and the same kind of
quest lines.
Yes, whereas in the adventure module, like, no, everybody's kind of coming up with their own main characters, so, like, that really manifestly changes the story. So there's not a unifying experience for the tabletop role-playing game community other than we all do this game, but the way we do it might be totally different. It's like Christianity, right? Like, we might all be Christian, but, like, the Catholic and, like, the Methodist and the Westboro Baptist Church people, like, they're very different,
Who's the Westboro Baptist Church of Dungeons and Dragons?
Oh, man, I don't even know.
I mean,
like, extreme, like, fucking...
I mean, there are, like, gross people playing every game, but the thing about Dungeons and Dragons is you need to sit together at a table with a couple people.
Yeah.
Like, so once a week or a couple times a month.
Discussion.
Yeah, and so, like, if you're a real turd, like, you're not going to stay in a Dungeons and Dragons game. Like, unless you have a whole bowl full of turds, like, you're not going to...
Whole bowl full of turds.
And we've had a couple people over... Well, my Dungeons & Dragons game, although it's Pathfinder role, we're using the Pathfinder system now, but it started back in the early 2000s with the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition. We've been going for 20 years. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary actually this weekend. We're all going up to a cabin in the Poconos. 10 players for a weekend of reflection. We have custom T-shirts coming. It's a big fun event.
Oh, wow, dude.
But in that time, there have been a couple players who are like, we don't need to invite them.
All right, fair enough. Fair enough.
So, well, there might be enthusiasts out there. I don't know.
I was gonna ask, what is, like, is there, like, a gradual, like, rise to become the dungeon master?
Oh, it totally depends on the group. It's the dungeon master is both a privilege and a responsibility. Like, it's a workload, to be sure, beyond what players have. And so, in some groups, it's just like, no, Josh is our dungeon master. He's the one that does it, and he'll do, like, whatever. He got the new pre-written adventure, or the next, quest is going to be one he wrote, or whatever.
Yeah.
And in some groups, it's, well, we're going to pass it off. Some people, pay to go to gaming stores and play with a dungeon master there. For our group, we started with one person doing it, and then it kind of developed into 3 of us, and we'd round robin. And that was really great, because it was a second layer of collaborative storytelling, where we were kind of like, okay, so we want to tell this big story, like, so if you do part 1 over the course of like a year, then I can take over in a year and do part 2, which will be kind of this and this.
Word.
And then we kind of like built this like super story. We were doing this years before Marvel was.
Yeah.
So that was really fun. And these days, like, the 3 of us, one is a lawyer down in DC. One is about to get married, and he is super busy. He's the supreme leader of his Elks. No, it's the exalted ruler of the Elks.
Okay.
It's the Grand Poobah. I'll let you guess which one of those 3 is the real one. One of them is. But,
I can only aspire to be a Poobah one day.
I know.
Yeah.
So, he's increasingly busy, and then I'm about to have a kid. And
so you have to pass the
so the 3 of us are kind of like, well, we need some other people to be DMing, and we don't know how much we're going to be able to game. I'm still hoping to keep gaming, but at least for 6 months or a year or so. Like, that's really not.
Is there a menteeship that you end up taking, like kind of like the Kill Bill guy?
Right. So an informal one, in that they've played our games and they've seen the good games and the bad games. They can call out the moments where, like, man, you really did a great job with this, or like, man, that was you bungled that ending. And we can all, we might not agree on everything, but there are some where I'm like, man, I screwed that up so bad. If I'd done this and this, in retrospect, like, that would have been so much better. But one of the things about this game is it happens at the table live with everybody. Yeah. And so, sometimes
it's improv,
things happen in the moment where you're like, yeah, if I had known in advance, I could have thought of something, or like, I wish I had had something better to say at that moment. But like, it's in the moment, and so like, it's a live kind of art.
That's beautiful.
It's
do you remember your first time DMing?
Oh, that's a great question. Sure I do. Yes, because it's the first time I played Dungeons and Dragons. It was me and my brothers. We were on vacation up in Maine. We went to Bridgeton, Maine every summer. My dad would take us. We all got a cabin on a lake, and the 5 of us would go out onto this floating dock and like play King of the Dock, push each other off for hours. Yeah. And in the little bookstore in the town of Bridgeton, Maine, I found the Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition starter box. Some of you listeners out there might have bought the exact same box set with the initial adventure, levels 1 to 3 with Tordok the fighter, and there was an elf wizard and a dwarf cleric, and I was like, oh, cool, I've heard about Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
And it looks like a board game, so like, I'll buy it, my brothers and I can play it. And then we kind of played through this adventure, and I also had that, like, my dwarf definitely stole a ring off a corpse before anybody was looking. And the thing is, like, it's at the table, right? So my brothers were like, hey, that's not fair. And I was like, whatever, your characters didn't see it. And we kind of took turns being the DM, because for us, it was the DM was just the person who was like running the dungeon, moderator, and playing the, okay, 3 goblins come and attack you, I will roll for the goblins and their damage and control where they go on the board and whatever. Like, we didn't understand really like how to control NPCs, let alone how to create them yet. But it's an introduction to a really new concept, because it's combining a lot of things. Yeah. So everybody starts like we say, your characters in Dungeons and Dragons go from level 1 to like level 20 or even higher. But as a player, you definitely go from level 1 to whatever level you eventually get to. Like, you realize things, some of the things I've been talking about as you go, and you become a better and better player, right? We all go through times where we're like, I need to stand up to the dungeon master right now, or I need to assert my will right now. And we also learn eventually, like, I see where the dungeon master is going with him, and I will facilitate this. Like, yep, that might not, my character might not have thought to go along with it, but now I see where you're going. Like, this is an adventure setup, so like, yeah, sure, I'll follow the old man into the cave. So we go through these levels of like becoming better players.
You learn as you go along.
Yeah.
And when you're playing in these games, you kind of see how to DM, by watching your DM doing it. And as you do, we also a long time ago kind of instituted like moments where, okay, so the next 6 sessions, each one will be run by one of you players, and it's about your character or whatever. And so kind of gave them training wheel sessions within the game to kind of give everybody a chance to tell a story and to experience game mastery, being the dungeon master. Because it's that also makes you a better player. Once you're behind the curtain, or once you're behind the DM screen, as we call it, you have, I don't know if you've seen in Stranger Things.
Yeah.
Yep. So you have your little wall. Once you're behind that, looking out, and have to make decisions and have to do things on the fly and have to like decide, who do these guys shoot their arrows at, and also like, does the passerby see you or not? Like, sometimes there are moments in decisions in a moment, and once you've been the one who has had to make those decisions or experience them, like, you get an appreciation of it.
Right.
So when you're playing again, you're like, oh, okay,
you're like,
I remember that. Yep, and I don't want to cause a problem here because like we're just trying to enjoy this game. Oh,
so it's
can we use that bowl by any chance?
So you would say that dungeon mastering is a little bit like good directing, like good dungeon mastering.
Yes, absolutely. It's I've used this analogy before. It's also like producing and writing at the same time, but it's kind of like, Quentin Tarantino or Steven Spielberg, or like, obviously not on that level, but you're kind of doing it all. You're also the one who's putting together the soundtrack. We learned to incorporate music long ago.
Yeah.
And picking, whatever visuals, like you're the one coming up with the setting potentially, and describing like, what does this town look like? What does this magic castle look like? What does the inside of this dungeon look like as it's filling with lava? Whatever, like, and you're also the ones saying that that's where we're going. That's what we're seeing, right? So, although one of the things I like doing, and I'm really excited to see how this works with an audience, is when we go to places, I'll give cues to the players, or in this case, hopefully the audience, and be like, all right, so we're in this metropolitan city. It's got a very New Orleans feel, but there's like a lot of undead walking around. Like, there's a skeleton who's selling like fish, and like there's a zombie jazz band playing, and like there's a catfish guy who's strolling down the street, like spinning a gold watch fob. And what else do you see on the street? And then kind of throw it open to the players to see, like, well, what do they throw into this?
And that's them reacting, and they can create what they want.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, wow.
So they can say, whatever, like, there's an eel selling eel stew, and you don't want to ask any questions, or whatever, you kind of throw it out there, and it becomes like, it's not only a warm-up exercise, or kind of like a nice little workout for the imagination muscle for all the players, but it also gives them a bigger buy-in on what this what's going on here, and how the world looks and how it feels. Because one thing about D&D is, while we do have visual representations, you'll get art in the adventure, or you'll draw your own character, or you might even commission an artist to do to do work for your characters or locations or whatever. But even with that, how things look in everybody's heads is different, right? The story exists very much in everybody's own imagination space, and what they put more weight on or give more context to is up to them and in their moment. Even how players look or what their facial expressions are or any of that, who's prominent, is all in their own heads. And so when you have moments of describing something, trying to set a scene, whether it's a location or a feeling or a moment, and then throwing it open to them, it's kind of cueing everybody to say, what does this scene look like in your head? What's resonating here? What part of your imagination is being stimulated by what's happening here? So it's again, it's a kind of group storytelling that's unlike any other, because it happens in the moment and because it's generally for such a limited audience, right? It's just for the players.
Yeah.
It's weird, and I don't want this to be my one of the references into my D&D world. I heard that Vin Diesel is a big D&D player.
Yeah, there's lots of people who are, but it's
But he was mentioning, he's like, oh, it's this and this and this, and I'm and I'm seeing, and I go to acting school, and I've written screenplays and stuff, and the way you're describing how the DM will set the world.
Yep.
And how it is, I'm oh dude, that's training. That's insane.
Totally.
That's the closest amount of training for that. Yeah. It's just straight up storytelling.
It's just straight up storytelling. And
if DMing is directing in that way that you were talking about, then drawing on my own experience, being a player is being an improvisational musician who somebody sets a theme and you decide how you're going to respond to that, based on this scale or that scale, and each one gives it a different flavor. And you as the player are sort of thinking like that in these quasi, these improvisational terms. And I think that's kind of what brings it all together, is having this strong backbone that you flesh out to switch metaphors.
You're finding the kinship as in music, and that's beautiful.
Exactly. It's finding kinship is a great way to put it.
DM is a bass line, and
exactly. He's the bass line or the rhythm, in some way, and where
or drumming. Whatever. Yeah,
exactly.
And everybody's adding their colors all over.
He's the rhythm
beautiful
section, and we're the melody, the melodies and harmonies. And if we harmonize, the more we harmonize, the better the game sounds. Or in this case, I guess, looks.
And in the case of, for example, our Star Wars game, it's very easy for all players because everybody loves Star Wars, right? Everybody who's playing, that is. Not everybody in the world, but
the lore is easily attached to.
But also but you have your own emotional feelings of what the story is and what you would want to be or want to do if you were in that universe. And you also have a very strong feeling of what is Star Wars-y and what isn't. And so when you're there in the moment and you've got this scene laid out before you where your character is invested and you're hearing the music and getting the visual reps of these spaceships and these aliens, in that moment it's very easy to, Justin says to harmonize to I can sing something, I can come up with a piece, I can riff on this in a way that's very Star Wars-y. And the same thing with a Dungeons and Dragons game. When you set the tone and you kind of try to give people these cues as to what this game is going for as far as its feel or its style, they're able to do the same thing. We've played games that are Western games, or this is an apocalyptic epic, or this is a very fun kid-centric fantasy enchanted game. People will respond and build into that, or at least be aware enough to know when they're kind of defying what are elements of these kind of stories or these tropes.
Yeah. And that's, I think, maybe where the music comes in a little bit too, and what we're trying to do with the music. Just basically the reason I'm here. I play in the band Soulfar, which is a kind of atmospheric metal band. And what we decided to do with this game was to try to create, a theme for each character, a custom theme, so they could sort of be all right, I want this to be Western sounding, or classical sounding, or metal sounding, heavy sounding, and I wanted to kind of convey this emotion. And so far, two of us at least who are also in the game,
Yeah.
have been working on music where we've been trying to create, okay, this is what each character's theme will sound like. And it's just like another dimension. You have, usually the visual, and we're trying to bring in a more custom musical element too, to allow each character to sort of present themselves to the audience on through a different media, right? And try to get that sense of who they are across through music.
Yeah, like I was wondering, like, how do you like approach like scoring a board game?
So the original score I just tried to think of, the original theme I just tried to think of, like, it's just epic, but it also has this kind of pastoral background in which these very sheltered characters are going to come into this high
open
politics
world.
epic battle for the for power kind of thing. Much like Star Wars, where Luke comes from Tatooine and then eventually gets embroiled in
And you're just listening as the story goes along.
Yeah.
You're seeing how the peaks go,
Yep.
and then like the fucking gets. Yeah, that's fucking epic, dude.
So I tried to do that, and I was like, the first part sets the tone of kind of martial tone of the world. And then there could be a little interlude with flute that sets the tone of the dog people.
Very bucolic, very humble,
heroes,
feels like
bucolic,
Hobbiton.
rural, yeah.
Dude, that's so fucking.
And then
cool.
the end, I tried to bring them together, and then out of that, once you have that in place, you could ask each character, okay, like, do you hear anything in that you like? And you're like, I want that to be my theme. So, one melody from that became a particular character's theme, but instead of being done in like flute and strings, it was done in synthesizer, very precious kind of tones. It sounds like a moment in a Final Fantasy game when the character's looking up at the stars. So that's the idea, is to try to listen to people, to start out with a set of motifs or themes, whatever you want to call it, that you can draw on, and to really try to keep in mind what Paul's saying about bringing people's vision to life. So it's been like a cool thing, and definitely very different from writing metal music, from writing heavy kind of music.
Word, dude. No, that's it's like making me like, it's like making me my anchor point right now is like Oblivion and Morrowind. I was just a big Morrowind.
Yep.
It's like going out of the dungeon for the first time
Exactly.
in Oblivion and like seeing how lush the world is.
Yep.
Like, you know what I mean? Like
And you get that
Morrowind was
sense,
like, this is a whole fucking world, and this is so crazy. It's like the shroom world.
Exactly.
Fucking,
And the
but,
music,
like seeing it and like hearing like this. Yeah, it's beautiful, dude. That's great, dude.
And this is one of the most exciting things about Worlds Collide is, and it's another one that came up really serendipitously, and I was approached by Prototype 237 about doing a live kind of Dungeons & Dragons game. And so I had this idea in my back pocket that I'd been holding on to for a while that I thought was like, this is a really fun, cool story. And I talked to Lislos about it, and he was like, I'd be really interested in playing one of the protagonists of that game. And I was like, awesome, I love that, because you're like not in our regular group. You're also not as familiar with like the rules or our setting, so like you coming into this like will really feel like a crash landed astronaut on an alien world. And then he was like, hey, I don't know if it's okay with you, but like, what would you think about like me doing some music for this? At the same time that I was struggling with, like, I usually use whatever music I want because it's just nerds sitting around a table, right? But we're going to be broadcasting this, we're going to be live streaming it, we're going to have a monetized feed for that, and so like I just can't use any music I want.
Yeah.
And so when Soulfar came along with the idea to do like a soundtrack, like that is a whole new thing. Like that's a privilege and an honor and like a creative, an amazing creative opportunity that like I can't imagine how many DMs get the chance to do that for their game, or to have that as an element.
Yeah.
That is so cool. The same way that doing the live theatrical performance is like, most people don't get to do this. We're usually at a dining room table, using music on like YouTube of like, here's this old Sergio Leone tune.
Yeah.
So far, and I've been getting, every time I get one of the new themes for the characters, it's like, yes, awesome. Like this feels so good. Like it puts the characters in more context to me. It gives me more ideas for them. Like, again, it's this collaboration when like the more artists that are working on something, if like putting together a movie, like being the director in this case, it really feels like that, where I'm kind of like working with the studio, quote
This is my composer right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're trying to get,
These are my actors.
these exactly. And we're trying to get some more
Paladin
musicians into the
Midway.
mix.
Yep.
So that it just feels, again, more collaborative and less MIDI sounding, because I'm recording it on a computer right now.
Which I'm also cool with, like, if it has some of that sound, or even all of that sound, like, that's fine, because it can have this video gamey feel. Like, it's got this kind of classic retro story that I think you could imagine as a video game. It's very easily adapted, but we're just doing this as a, as this live game, as this Dungeons & Dragons style game. But if it has that feel of like a Final Fantasy or like an early like Zelda, like this kind of like classic retro feel, like that's great. I love it. Yes.
Yep. Oh yeah. That's what I harken back to a lot. Is like Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9, Castlevania.
It kind of reminds me of like the old silent films, like how they would have those the orchestra pit. Yeah, it's fucking great.
That'd be the best if we could have an orchestra pit to play all this
orchestra.
Stuff. Like,
I mean, it's as close as you're gonna get, man.
It's as close as we're gonna get, exactly.
Well, we're gonna get some live musicians on a couple of nights where we're doing performances. So
that's great.
Like halfway through the run, when they've kind of had a chance to like play the music before, get a feel for the game, and they'll be able to come in and hopefully like riff off some of these themes that Soulfar is doing. So they'll be able to know like, okay, this is Murder the Crow Knight's theme, or like this is the theme for the Starman or the protagonist or whatever. Like, oh, the Centaur is like doing this awesome thing in combat. Like, let's rock out to the Centaur's theme.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
And, we're only a 3-member project, but the vocalist he's busy this whole time, so it's nice because the two instrumentalists, we're both going to be playing in the game, and we're both composing together.
How does the vocalist approach this kind of setting?
He's not involved.
Yeah.
Oh, all right, I was going to say,
he's off. He's on vacation.
I would only assume it'd be like some Dio shit.
That's what I would imagine. That's the only thing I think would sound right. Dio's the ultimate fantasy metal vocalist.
Yeah, you'd be putting words in people's heads.
Yeah, but no, vocals wouldn't work.
Well, what we're talking about is getting some
choral.
Some choral.
Yeah.
We got some folks who could do some singing, to do some back out kind of Duel of the Fates,
Straight up.
Yo, that shit's
We're gonna get
awesome,
translate some cool words into some Eastern European languages, and get some cool murder, but in Hungarian, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, it's like a fun challenge to do this. Usually I'm just kind of picking music. I'm going through film soundtracks to get the cool stuff, but with this, approaching him with I think this guy he's a bounty hunter, so maybe a Western theme, a twangy guitar, we can really set the mood for all these characters in a really unique way. It's so cool.
Yeah,
it's so cool. Tell me a little bit about the founding of Union City Heroes. So what is this about?
Sure. Yeah. So this is my company. It's a gaming company, and we started off. The first thing we did was a superhero role-playing game system. So like Dungeons and Dragons, but for a superhero game. And it's just our own unique system for building your hero, for doing combats. It's a very fun. It's you tell the story in panels and in pages. Your powers will last for X number of pages. So it's a kind of fun free-form system, and we got some good response from that. And we had built a fan base. For years, I had been running superhero games and always setting them in Union City, which is our own fictional version. The Union City, New Jersey is obviously part of the inspiration. Union City is like Metropolis or Gotham. It's like a fictionalized city on the East Coast of America where superheroes, there are a ton of superheroes and supervillains.
I would akin Patterson to more as a Gotham City.
I would say so. Yep.
There is one guy who walks around in a tiger mask, and he's one of my muses.
Yeah,
honestly, the photography in the city. Anytime I see tiger masks,
until
he gets tiger
mask.
goons, you're okay.
Yeah,
once he gets 3 or 4 other guys, then you need to start worrying.
What Tiger Mask?
Yeah, when he
he's
gets
not
goons.
a villain. He's like, I think he's a hero.
Oh, you think he's a hero? Okay.
Oh, he's just the guy who skateboards in a tiger mask.
Okay.
And he comes up
I mean,
and
that
he just
sounds
vents
awesome.
to me a little bit sometimes. Like I don't know. He just knows I take photos of him. Really nice guy.
Nice.
That sounds like a great NPC for a D&D game.
What, Tiger
A guy
Mask?
just cruising around in a tiger mask, and you're like, I don't know. He's
on
like,
a skateboard.
Every once in a while, he whispers something to me.
Dude, yes, he does. Yeah. I don't know, every time I see
That's
him,
a fun
I
character
hear
for
the
an
theme
urban
from
setting.
Taxi
Yeah.
Driver. It's like, I'm like,
Yeah.
like this guy's seen the city. But I don't mean to get off track, but yeah.
No.
So this is inspired by Union City?
No. Union City is a name that I chose because I wanted a name that sounded plausible, that's realistic. There are Union cities, not just in New Jersey, but elsewhere. But I wanted a name that wasn't like a major city, you know, not anywhere that most people knew, but also a name that kind of was emblematic of something that I thought was good. And I you know, while every large structure has its ills, I support the Union. You know, I solidarity forever. Yeah.
Shout out to the WGA and the SAG-AFTRA motherfuckers.
Yes. Yeah. Solidarity forever. You know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I agree. The robots will not replace us.
Yes.
Yep. Same thing. And like over the years, over the 20 or plus years that I've been playing games set in Union City, I only identify more and more with, you know, the name. I'm very, very happy with Union City.
Yeah.
And its ethos. But it's really just like a superhero setting. You know, that name is as a bedrock, but it's, you know, superhero stories, and then a superhero game. And then we developed a board game, a kind of card board game where you build the board as you play, which got a really even bigger response. It's super cool. It's like a really fun game.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Thank you. And like
It's really fun.
that's really what we've been working on in a big way. It's taken up a ton of our time, and we're just finishing it up when I gave this speech at our a friend of ours engagement party, all about collaborative storytelling and Dungeons and Dragons, and like my experience with Dan, and afterwards I was approached by Alex from Prototype 237, and he said, hey, have you ever thought about running a live Dungeons and Dragons game on stage? And I said yes. Like no hesitation. I was like, yeah, I have been, you know, where have you been? I've been waiting for this. Like I am so ready. I have a gaming company. The game itself that I'm working on right now is at the printers. I'm done with it. Like I'm ready to move on to another creative project. Like this is something that fits in before my kid comes along. Like, and it's this amazing opportunity to do Dungeons and Dragons on a stage with an audience, because like we have these moments in Dungeons and Dragons that are very big, that are emotional, that like, you know, hit or like are very exciting and enthralling. And it's great to have, you know, 6 or 7 people around the table who are really jazzed about that. But
Made somebody cry.
Yes, more than once. But to have a whole audience, like, the energy in that room is going to be so cool. I'm so excited to have more people be able to experience this, and to write a story that's catered to, like, okay, come on in, we're going to tell you this whole story. Like, you're going to be able to follow the whole thing. You don't need to know anything. Like, we're all coming in on this together. We'll all finish it up together, and we're all going to be able to, like, hopefully, like, this will be like a play or a movie, or just in 6 parts.
Sounds like it. That's
Yeah.
why I was like, oh shit, this is just like a straight up, like, one-day theater play.
Only it's in 6
But
parts.
it's improv. Like, it's
And
all...
it's improv, yep.
Improv. I don't know.
Improv.
Is that like
Improv.
parkour?
Yep.
Let's go.
Musique.
Word, bro.
Yep.
So what do you think? Anything else on the cards? So what date is that?
So that starts in September, I think. Hold on one second. Let me grab my calendar here. September 12th is opening night. That's part 1. Session 1 is called Dog Days. And because it takes place in this land Honchak, where there's a large population of dog folk who are anthropomorphic dog people. And
Shout out to Tuck, who is also...
Tucker might very well be a character who shows up in this game. And actually, on our Kickstarter, We have 10 people who get the loyal companion level. You can submit a dog, and we'll get them done up as a dog folk. We'll get the art done. You design a costume, and then they'll appear at somewhere in the game.
Oh, it's dope.
Right? So if you got a dog you love, and this sounds cool, like, get them in the game, and you'll get an awesome piece of art. You can, get it printed, get it framed, put it on your wall, whatever. Like, it'll be your dog in a, period Dungeons and Dragons style costume, and you can name them. They'll show up in the game. It's just one of the ways we're trying to have this kind of a group storytelling.
Word.
Yep.
Word. So September
12th, and we're going to run until November 14th, I think.
So what is it, once every 2 weeks or once every...
About once every 2 weeks.
Once every 2
and it's going to be Tuesday nights here at Prototype 237, or upstairs at Prototype 237. We're going to put out there's a full calendar. It's on the Kickstarter. The Kickstarter is live now. That's running through August 15th. Please back us. For $5 you can get access to the live stream, and all this money is going to go to way more art, more maps, more cool stuff for the table, just making this a totally cooler, better experience for the whole audience. So it's a really exciting project. It's going to run. I think it's November. It's actually, I think, November 10th or November 17th. We have a baby date in there because, like I said, we're right at the due date, and there are 2 days that we have set aside for the finale.
Or the most interesting Dungeons and Dragons match you have ever seen.
Well, the Paladin Midwife will finally get his chance to debut.
Yep. All right, guys. Paul from Union City Heroes. Leaf Loss from Solfar. Afternoon FM. Stay beautiful, people. Wonderful conversation, guys.
Matt, thanks so much.
Thanks for having us. It's great talking.